Namastu, which means I bow to the divinity in you, and welcome to another edition of Q Radio here from historic Baintown in Nassau, Bahamas. Of course, Q Radio is the radio show that is on a quest to give you the Atonis Karastian narrative. And of course, my name is Anku Sa Ra, and definitely I'm very, very happy that we're here today, and we're going to allow our viewers to catch on. But I want to just, while that's happening, take a moment to give a shout out to our sponsors. Today we're being sponsored. Of course, we're under the auspices of the Holy Qubtic Church of the Black Messiah. And Q Radio is being sponsored by Qubtic Village, Florida, as well as Qubtic Kitchen Bahamas. You can call Qubtic Kitchen Bahamas right now, 810-3457, 810-3457. They're taking orders as we speak, as we have a wonderful, wonderful menu. You can check it out on my Facebook page or even at the Facebook page of Qubtic Kitchen Bahamas. And of course, for all of your chlorine needs, you want to check out Chlorine Depot at 424-6658, 424-6658. And of course, if you want to become a sponsor, please make sure you inbox me today or call the numbers at the top of the screen, 426-1148, or you can pay through PayPal at journeyhomegroup2@aol.com, and we'll get you sorted out for your mentions. And then eventually, as the show grows, we'll be able to play your commercials and get you to a very broad audience. We're really gaining listenership or watcher or viewership, and so the reach of the show is going to grow. And we definitely want to thank you all for participating in any way you can. All right. So today we have a show that I think may be a little controversial for some, but it's not necessarily intended to be controversial, but I can't always control that. But the question is, should women preach and teach in churches? Should women preach and teach in churches? Now, this is often a hot topic because there are those who are adamant about the fact that women definitely should not take up a leadership position. You know, you go to many churches today and you'll see that there's the main altar where only men can speak from. And then they'll have something on the side, a podium on the side that allows, you know, women or anybody else that is not a part of the clergy to speak from. And I'm not here to knock those churches. I'm not here to say that those people are wrong. I'm just simply, we're simply going to share with you the reality of the Qubtic perspective, or the Atonis Karastian or true Christian perspective, whereby we delve into our story and understanding, you know, who we are as a people and why we do what we do. Because at the end of the day, people are always going to be who they are, and they're going to definitely, you know, follow the traditions or the ways of their ancestors or those who would have groomed them. And so at the end of the day, you know, we have to respect that. And we ask that we too get the same respect, because at the end of the day, we are a teaching church that wants to share what we teach. And that's going to conflict with what other churches teach. And you know what? Sometimes that's okay. All right. So again, I'm always clear about the fact that we're not here to debate. We're not here to attack anybody, but more so to share and give you the Atonis Karastian narrative. So the crux of the matter when it comes to women actually being able to teach in churches is really a distinction between whether the society is a matriarchal society, that is a society that is more respectful and more, it honors the woman more so than the patriarchal society that will honor the men more so. Yes. And what's interesting, in one of our parchments called The Rise of the Divine Feminine Now, all right, you can check it out at journeyhomegroup.com, or if you're in the Bahamas, you can come by the Holy Qubtic Church. But we asked the question, how did matriarchal and patriarchal societies on Ta Earth come about? Because at the end of the day, what's happening is there are doctrines that are coming out of the matriarchal societies and there are doctrines that are coming out of the patriarchal societies. But one of our Qubtic popes, which we call a Baba, Sheikh Anti Diop, all right? And for those of you who are not familiar with Baba Sheikh Anti Diop, I'm going to put his name right here at the bottom or in the comments list so you can actually check him out either on YouTube or you can Google him, because this particular person, you know, if you're a person who's interested in knowing the true story behind we as Nubian Melaninites, you definitely need to have Sheikh Anti Diop as a guide or a reference. But this Qubtic Pope or Baba, he inscribed, proved, and taught in one of his works, Cultural Unity of Black Africa, Domains of Matriarchy and Patriarchy in Classical Antiquity and Civilization or Barbarism. So these are works by this Qubtic Pope, all right? We refer to him as a Qubtic Pope, yes? And so I'm placing that there as well, all right? And what he was saying was, or what he was explaining to all of those who wanted to know the truth, because at the end of the day, everybody doesn't want to know the truth or the reality behind things. What Sheikh Anti Diop is explaining to all who are seeking true faith, as well as those who have embraced true faith, is that in order to properly understand how melaninite, matriarchal, and melanin recessive patriarchal societies formed, environmental conditions must also be looked at in determining how certain societies evolve. So you have the melanated matriarchal societies, you have the melanin recessive patriarchal societies, and what he is saying is we got to look at the environment, the conditions of the environment, in order to appreciate why each of these societies or each of these cultures developed the way that they did. All right. So after all of his intelligent, spiritual, careful, and well-documented examination, our Qubtic saint and Baba Sheikh Anti Diop gave all of humanity, especially those of the global Nubian Melaninite family, a literary and scientific blessing that is the two-cradle system of cultural origin. So Sheikh Anti Diop said, listen, all of this talk about us being one and the same is cute, but at the end of the day, we have to look at the reality of a two-cradle system of cultural origins. All right, now this two-cradle system of cultural origins, all right, versus the uncivilized origin. So you have a cultural origin and you have an uncivilized origin, is such that it accounts for how humanity came to be divided into matriarchies and patriarchies. So we have to first of all acknowledge that there are matriarchal societies. Many of the African or indigenous societies that the Europeans came upon were matriarchal societies. As a matter of fact, before we even dive into what this two-cradle system of culture was all about, let's just take a moment to go into the book of Proverbs, because I want you to see that this is not something that the Holy Qubtic Church is just making up. Proverbs, first chapter, we're going to look at verse 8. All right, and if you read this entire chapter, you'll find out that wisdom is personified, number one, as a woman. So that in and of itself, all right. So verse 8 says, my son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. So the father in our matriarchal societies was seen as the tribal ruler. The mother, however, was seen and known as the tribal leader, because it says to forsake not the law of thy mother. Okay, again, when we go into the verses before, since we're here, I just want to show it to you. Verse 1, the proverb of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Verse 2, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. So there's wisdom and then there's instruction. There's the mother, there's the father, right? To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equality. To give subtlety to the simple, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and the dark sayings. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. It says, my son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If thou say, come with us, let us wait for blood. Let us lurk privately for the innocent without. So in other words, if people start talking foolishness around you, go back to these laws. Go back to this wisdom, all right, which is being personified as a woman. All throughout the book of Proverbs, it talks about this virtuous woman, all right, especially Proverbs 31. But the woman is glorified, and the woman is seen as being the seat of wisdom, okay? And so that being said, let's jump into the two-cradle system of cultural origin. So the first system was that which was found in Tamare, or ancient Africa, North America, South America, Caribbean, and the Indus River Valley, the equatorial southern sun cradles, which, because of the natural and abundant weather and soil richness of these tropical regions, allowed for agricultural cultures to develop, in which the divine feminine mother figure reached a state of importance because of her crucial role in cultivation and agriculture. So the women were responsible for, as we would say, domesticating a lot of crops. All right. So we as men, this whole idea of being the hunter-gatherer is very much a European reality, or more so a European reality, because yes, we did do some hunting. Yes, we did do some gathering, but we had farms. And the women were a big part of those farms and a big part of the reality of why those farms actually worked and why we have agriculture today. It says the males within these matriarchal societies, as children of nature, left their parents and moved in with their wives or their wife, the tribe or the clan or the family, as a protector. So we see this today, again, if we go into the book of Genesis chapter 2, all right, and we're going to be around the 24th verse. It says, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. So why is it in this day and time we have a reality where if you go to a wedding today, a traditional Christian wedding, you will see a man waiting at the altar, and you will see a woman being brought to the altar, and they will ask, who is giving this woman away? Which is totally opposite to what Genesis chapter 2, verse 24 is saying. And the reason why it's opposite is because the ceremonies that we have today and the appreciation of what marriage is today is really based on a patriarchal system. All right? So the males in the matriarchal societies, as children of nature, they left their parents, moved in with their wives, their family, the tribe, the clan as a protector. The females were the tribal leaders, as we talked about earlier, and through them and their mitochondrial DNA, their fathers, brothers, and husbands and sons became tribal rulers. So this whole idea of a woman taking on a man's name really comes from the fact that, for example, if we go back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, when it says that a man will leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife, it don't mean that the man's supposed to become a little punk when it says cleave unto his wife. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that all of the children that that man and that woman will only have the mitochondrial DNA of that woman. So I have the mitochondrial DNA of my mother. I don't have the mitochondrial DNA of my father. My father has the mitochondrial DNA of his mother. All right. And that mitochondrial DNA is only passed from mother to child, only. And what the patriarchal societies did to cover that reality up was to say that the man is responsible for passing on the name or the lineage. Okay. Now, in some cultures, I know in Puerto Rico, I have a friend of mine I went to high school with. He had his mother's last name, and he said that they have a culture whereby they still respect this reality. All right. So you still do have it in some places. All right. But unfortunately, we don't have it in the churches today. These matriarchal societies were extremely stable societies whose focus was based on maintaining harmony within their respective groups and intimate relationship with nature. So we're talking about the law of the mother now, the law of Ma'at, universal balancement, universal order and the balancement of deeds. Yes? An intimate relationship with nature, the importance of communal bonds. These are the things that the women kept as a benchmark for the community. The importance of the divine feminine within the family structure and in collective relationships, including the fact that the primary divinities were usually female at first and then evolved towards incorporating a male element or a consort attribute. So when we spoke of divinity, divinity originally was female. Okay? Now you can see this again in the ancient African, and not even ancient African societies. You can go over there right now, and if we honest with ourselves in many of our houses, yes, where there is a functioning family unit with regards to a husband and a wife, right? You'll often hear, go ask your mommy. You understand what I'm saying? Or you will see where when the father comes home, if the law was not followed, the mother's law, and I don't mean just laws that she made up, I mean the laws that actually align with what we call ma'at, those laws that bring order. If you didn't align with that, well, guess what? The ruler was not just a title, but it was, in some instances, an object used to go across our backside. Now, that's a whole nother show in terms of spanking children and should you spank children, but the discipline is what I'm talking about. All right? So divinity, even if we go to the Ka-Hun papers, I'm going to share a link with you because there's a reality that, again, we're not really being taught in the churches, and there's no disrespect to any of the male leaders, but my goodness, you have to know the truth if you want to be free. But there's a manuscript or papyrus called the Ka-Hun papyrus, okay? And the Ka-Hun papyri, and we're going to talk more on this too because they did a vicious thing in lying on what these papers were all about, all right? But I put it in the link for you to check it out. But these are actual medical papers. Now, these are fragments. These are veterinary as well as actual medical, human medical documents. But these Ka-Hun were actually women, okay? These Ka-Hun were actually women. And, one of the ways that we know this has a lot to do with the Ka-Hun gynecological papyrus. This whole idea of men being OBGYNs, I mean, okay, there are some great ones out there, but originally this is something that women did. This was something that the woman in the Mamisi was the birthing house, all right? This is something that women tended to, all right? And she was seen as a divine mother, all right? And what she did was connected to our churches or our kanisa, because we do not separate in our churches science from religion. We do not separate the sacred from the mundane. We do not separate the physical from the spiritual, all right, which we'll talk about in times to come. Now, within these matriarchal societies, the first mathematical systems, which you will also see in the Ka-Hun papyrus, within these matriarchal societies, the first mathematical systems of keeping time that were utilized were first based off of the estrous cycle and then eventually the menstrual cycle, because women did not always have a menstrual cycle. Women had what was called an estrous cycle, and we could do a show on that. We'll when we speak with the boss Sesh one of these days, we'll ask him about it. But the estrous cycle is similar to when you see an animal on heat, all right, during a particular time of the year or a particular period, the animal goes on heat. And I hate saying it that way because I don't want to say that women are like animals. I'm just using that as an example. So don't bite my head off, right? But I'm just using it as an example because the menstrual cycle that we see today was not always with women, all right? And that's a whole nother show. I'm not getting into that today. But they use that as a way to create what you know as math today, the mathematical systems. All right, the initial timekeeping systems were partly based on the female estrus and menstrual cycle. So they knew the time based on what was happening to them. All right, and which were more regular than it is in this latter day because of the difference in diet and the relative absence of artificial lighting, and because of the surplus of food, a certain amount of occupational specialization was possible, all of which held precedence over more aggressive, competitive activities such as military pursuits. So women could do what women were designed to do. I don't mean know your role, women. That's not what we're saying. We're saying a man and a woman, we have roles. And you're good at what you do, and we're good at what we do, and then we do meet in the middle, and there's some things that we can do. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why we're complementary. So that's the first all right, which evolved and was and is obviously different. And this was the Nordic ice cradle of Indo-Aryan and Caucasian Anglo-Eurasia. So now we're getting into what is being called the uncivilized origins, all right, of what is called society or civilization today. This second cradle system developed due to the harsh, wintry climates and the critically short supply of food reserves. So there's always cold. You can't hardly grow food in the cold. So they were hoarders, all right? As a result of hunting, gathering, and warfare amongst these people, as a result, the hunting, gathering, and warfare amongst these people took priority over the agriculture because it's hard to have agriculture if it's freezing, all right? The tribes were mobile. There were roving bands, first called Canaanites, as you see in the book of Genesis chapter 10, or even in the Barashith in scroll 10, which were composed of 3 sets of 12 invading dynasties led by the Nordic Sidonians called the Vikings, the 6 kings. They literally had to invade, fight, pillage, and enslave other tribes as a survival tactic. This mentality still rules today. This is why the church today, all right, if we're honest with ourselves, did not Christianize people in a very Christian way, not the Greco-Roman churches, right? They're the ones singing, "Onward, Christian soldiers, marching," and the rest of the word. If you go and just Google the words for that song, they were actually utilizing military strategies to conquer people and then call themselves Christians. But this is where this is coming up from, this second cradle system, all right, which evolved from the Nordic ice cradle, all right? It says, among these, and we're coming from the parchment, The Rise of the Divine Feminine Now, all right, around page 90. Among these Indo-Aryan and European dynasties, hypermasculine attributes were desired, while the females were looked upon as little more than baggage, fit only to bear children, preferably male children, of course, and to be a comfort in times of need, right? So women were seen almost as children. To have children, they were seen as baggage. In contrast to the matriarchal societies, it was the females who married into the male's family and left their tribe or clan or family. That's what we're seeing today in the churches. Woman leaves and she has to fight to keep her last name. Yeah. She took his name, his lineage was traced along the male line, and he literally held the power of life and death over her in a system which promoted dominion over nature. So the woman, being more in tune or at one with nature, was seen or likened unto nature. And so when they said have dominion over the fish of the sea or the birds of the air, etc., in the book of Genesis, woman was included in that. Right? It goes on to say their gods or goddesses were also malevolent, warlike, often lonely figures that either had no consort or had one who was clearly subordinate to them, and they tolerated no difference of any kind, whereby statements such as I am a jealous God came about. This is where this whole jealous God comes from. It comes from this Greco-Roman or European or Nordic cradle system, which gave birth to patriarchal societies. All right, so the false notion was and continues to be supported by the Indo-Aryans, the Greco-Romans, the Canaanite Babylonians, and the Khazarian Jebusite Jews, whereby the region of present-day Iraq, Palestine, Iran, etc., was where these two cradles came in direct contact with one another. So here's the issue now we're having. These two cradles, or these two societies, the matriarchal and the patriarchal societies, boom, they clash. All right. And this is where it was here in the so-called biblical holy lands that these two cradles not only came in direct contact with one another, but were also with the subjugation of the patriarchy over the older matriarchal cultures took place. So they took the views of patriarchy and vamped down on matriarchy. You understand? Eventually, out of Indo-Aryan, Greek, and Roman systems was birthed the Jebusite Jewish, Alexandrian, Greek Orthodox, Constantinian Roman Catholic, the King James Anglican, and the Pale Arab Emirate Mohammedan beliefs, which held and do still hold an immense amount of power and influence globally. And though on the surface they have made some concessions towards females, especially the Nubian, Melanite, or so-called Black, Caribbean, Latino female, asserting their femininity, they actually work constantly to suppress and continually prevent the rise of the divine feminine and her divine masculine child through the globally codified domination of women. So when we ask the question, or ask the question, should women preach and teach in the churches? This has everything to do with the reality of these two systems, these two cradle systems of cultural origins. All right. So you see today, when you go into many churches, they'll beat women over the head or anybody over the head with a couple of verses, right? And these verses say to women that they should not speak in the church. And I'm just going to go to Google right now. All right. So women not speaking in church. Because at the end of the day, this is not something that, it's not a big secret, right? But it's so taboo in many instances that people don't discuss it, and it's so controversial. It really shouldn't be controversial, right? Let your woman, this is 1 Corinthians 14 and 34. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. What law? What law says that? Because Proverbs doesn't say that. Huh? What law are they talking about? They're talking about this patriarchal system that they have put in place to silence women. You understand? We also can look at 2 Timothy. We look at, first let's go to Galatians 1:11. For I, Paul, so this is Paul teaching now. All right. But have you know, brethren, that the gospel which was preached by me is not according to man, for I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. So all the things he's telling you about women, he's saying comes from Jesus Christ, which makes no sense. All right. It goes on to say, because I want to build the context of people think this is a divine decree. 1 Corinthians 4:37 and 38. If anyone thinks he is a prophet or spiritual, let him recognize that the things which I write to you are the Lord's commandment. But if anyone does not recognize this, he is not recognized. All right? So these quotes that people pull about women not being able to teach, about women not being able to speak in the church, a lot of this comes out of the New Testament. And coming out of the New Testament, the majority of the books were actually written by Paul. It has nothing to do with what the real and living Messiah was actually teaching. All right? Let's jump over to, I think it's 1 Timothy 2:11. Let's jump to 1 Timothy 2:11. Let's see what this is saying. 1 Timothy, I'm in the Blue Letter Bible. All right? All right? 1 Timothy 2:11. Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. But we just read in Proverbs where you were supposed to, as a child, follow the instructions of your father and the law of your mother. So where's this whole idea of a woman being silent? Where's this woman talking about usurping authority? At what point does the man get authority over the woman? Well, let's go to Genesis. Genesis 3. Our sisters today, and we're gonna. I'm just putting this out here so you can have some context for what we're talking about, right? But let's go to Genesis 3. All right, and let's go to verse 16. Genesis 3:16. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. How could the sorrow be multiplied if she never had it before? But that's another show. We talked about that earlier. Adam and Eve obviously couldn't have been the first two people on the planet, right? But he's greatly multiplying thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. Now, what's interesting about this is a curse. So are we saying that women today are cursed? Is that what we're saying? Because I thought they were saved just like the men. I thought once they gave their lives to Jesus that they too were saved. But apparently that's not the case. Yes? Yes, Eduardo Simba. 1 Corinthians 14:34 and 35. It says, I had this to work, thy rebuke the word of God's Christians. I'm not too familiar or understanding why you're putting that up there, but maybe you could explain in the comment box, right? And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to watch this segment of Q Radio. I see a question from Latoya Colley. So why the Bible says that during the women's cycle, they were put in another hut. Again, this was the Greco-Roman perspective. And we're going to talk about, I don't have time to talk about it today, but they made women unclean, as they would say, because they recognize the first person to shed blood for you is your mother. So how are you going to disrespect your mother and tell her she can't teach? The first teacher of the children is the mother. So how is it that the woman who, they say the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, how is the mother who is teaching the children, right? These same men who were taught by their mothers or some female, all right, because most of the teachers that we've had in our lives have been females. How is it now that after you've been taught by women, that women now need to be quiet in the church? That doesn't make too much sense to me personally, right? And that's not the case in the Holy Qubtic Church, all right, which is what we're getting to right now, all right? But I want to throw some things at those who are saying, well, no, women aren't supposed to teach in the churches, all right? Because 1 Corinthians 14 and 1 Timothy 2, all right, makes it clear that all these women need to be quiet. But were there women in the Bible who taught spoke in the church, and led men. There were plenty. All right. So who were the first two people to recognize the undeserved favor of God revealed in Christ Jesus and get their words recorded in the Bible? Who are these women? Well, Mary and her cousin Elizabeth. Mary became the first preacher of the new covenant grace when she declared, "All generations will call me blessed, for the mighty one has done great things for me." Why are these angels going to women if women are supposed to be quiet? Why is Gabriel always going to a woman? He went to Elizabeth, went to Mary, went to Samson's mother. If these women don't have any place in the church, why do they have place in the agenda of these angels? Who was the first to proclaim the good news of Christ's resurrection? Mary Magdalene. And notice that she was sent by Jesus to instruct the man in John 20:17. Who was the first to evangelize? Now, what's interesting is, because I'm just giving you some points based on what the Greco-Roman Church, even those in the Greco-Roman Church who don't agree with the fact that they say women can't speak in the church. There are those in those churches that are saying, well, that's not right. And this is what they're saying. They're saying, who was the first to evangelize a Gentile town? Now, of course, Joshua told us not to go to the Gentiles. So this is something that we're not, agreeing with. But it says the woman at the well in John 4:28, which means that a woman understood the Great Commission before Peter or any of the apostles. Can women prophesy? Sure, there were female prophets. Miriam, Deborah, Huldah, Anna, and Philip's four daughters. Who led the church at Ephesus? Priscilla, along with her husband, Aquila. All right? Paul also called Priscilla a fellow worker in Christ in Romans 16:3. So how is he saying women need to be quiet in one instance? But then that's Paul, because Paul is all over the place. Paul wants to be everything to everybody, right? Which female apostle did Paul endorse? Junia. In Romans 16:7, Paul said she and Andronicus were outstanding among the apostles. Now, what's important to note is some Bible translators are so bothered by female apostles that they have turned Junia into Junias and made her a man. So that's how deep this thing goes, right? Which two women contended for the gospel at Paul's side? Judea and Syntyche in Philippians 4, verses 2 and 3. These two ladies were famous for disagreeing, but they ought to have been famous for preaching alongside Paul. Since y'all love Paul so much, we'll do a whole show on Paul, right? Which women led? Because there had to be women that led. Miriam, along with Moses and Aaron, was one of the three leaders of Israel during the Exodus from Egypt, as they would say, in Micah 6:4. Deborah, the prophetess, was a judge of Israel and basically in charge of the army in Judges 5:6. If women could lead under the misogynistic old covenant, then they can surely lead under the new covenant, and they did. All right, so this is the perspective of a Greco-Roman follower who is saying they don't agree with it. But ladies, I gotta speak to you for a second right now, okay? If you are in a church that is telling you that you should not speak, that you should learn in silence, that you cannot be in leadership, then I have to now look at you and ask you, why are you a part of that church? I have to pause there for a second. Why are you there? Why are you in the church that is disrespecting you as the mother, as the teacher, as those who, and we're going to do a show on it, who were on earth first? The woman was on earth first. This is why she's called the mother of all living, because she would now be on this planet, the portal, the doorway between heaven and earth. But again, this is an African precept. The Greeks and the Romans don't like women. You go to Greece, you go to Rome, you see a bunch of naked statues of men. Go to the Vatican City, they got naked statues of David. Why would I want to see any of these people naked, right? But that's, again, the mentality of when you talk about the two cradle system, one being matriarchal and one being patriarchal. The reality is it's coming out of the Greco-Roman perspective. But you women who have the power are still in those churches giving them power. So that's really what I want to get to right now. Why are you in a church that disrespects you? Because in the Holy Coptic Church, women are priestesses, women are missionaries, women can soar to any height that a man can soar to. Women can become pope in this church. We have BBs, which are female popes, and we have Babas, which are male popes. So in this church, we have a Baba and a BB. You understand? So this whole idea that you would have just a man leading the church, that's what they call in our society a broken home, a single parent home. So the church as we know it today, technically, is a single parent church that only respects the father, that has essentially made the woman a ghost, because they'll tell you that God is a Trinity. And the reality of the situation is, when you say, well, God is a Trinity, and you say God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, well, where is the boy's mother? Because the boy is calling him the father. So where's the boy's mother? Don't show me no ghosts. You understand? And that's why in many of our homes, the men have become ghosts, or the women have become ghosts. We got single parent families. And I'm not knocking, I came out of a single parent family. I'm not knocking the situation you're in. I'm just saying, why are we not respecting the family the way that we should? Why are we not respecting leadership in the churches the way we should? And I have to say to you women, because you women go to church more than men. So as you women sitting in those churches, allowing it to happen, that's what's causing it to happen. We're saying, hey, you can actually come to a church that sees you for who you are. You can actually be a part of a congregation that respects you as a woman and knows and honors that and understands that the law was personified as a woman. When you look at these scales, they call them the scales of justice. Originally, they were called the scales of Ma'at, and there was a woman at the scale, Ba'u, the consort or the wife of one called Anabu. All right, Ma'at watches the scales. You understand? But we still quote Paul, whereby Paul is simply saying, oh, and let's look at what Paul says about being a bishop. All right? Let's look at what Paul says about being a bishop, the requirements of being a bishop, right? Because there's something really interesting here. Requirements of being a bishop. This is, again, one of the things that is used to denigrate women and make them less than in the church. It says, this is 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 2 through 12. A bishop then must be blameless. It says, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. So automatically this disqualifies women, because this was the leadership within the churches that Paul and the Greco-Romans who were teaching to the Gentiles. This is the churches that they were building. And why wouldn't they want women to teach? Well, you have to go back to understand the role of women in Greece and Rome. They would argue in Greece that men and women were different species. This is how unintelligent these people were. They would say that a woman was a different species than a man. You understand? And in doing so, it carried over into their religion. You understand? In Rome, a woman was not, looked at in a respectable way. All right. There's an article, The Role of Women in the Roman World. I'll post it for you so you can check it out, right? Let's see what it says. The Master Brother Shashank. All right. But you can follow along, right? The role of women in the Roman world, the exact role and status of women in the Roman world, and indeed in most ancient societies, has often been obscured by the biases of both ancient male writers and 19th to 20th century male scholars, a situation only relatively recently redressed by modern scholarship, which has sought to more objectively assess women's status, rights, duties, representation. So in other words, they intentionally do not look at what good women have done. They say women in mythology, unlike some other ancient cultures, such as the Greeks, who had formed the creation myth, unlike some other ancient cultures, such as the Greeks, who had formed the creation myth, where women was a creature secondary to man, and more specifically in the form of Pandora, a bringer of unhappiness and vices, the Romans had a more neutral approach where humanity, and not specifically the male, was created by the gods from earth and water. So by the time as the Romans step in, they're not as misogynistic as what they're saying as the Greeks. But the point of the matter is their churches are still led by men. So again, as we read earlier, the reality of the situation is they pretend as if they're saying that the woman and the man is on par or equal to each other. But the reality of the situation is that the teaching of what is going on in the churches is such whereby the women are still not being allowed to be in the rulership that the men are being allowed to be in, even though she is called the wisdom within the book of Proverbs. You understand? But let's look at this whole reality of the word bishop. I want to go into the Strong's Concordance in 1 Timothy 3, because I want us to look at this word bishop for a second. So 1 Timothy 3, all right? It says,
hello, can I speak to someone?
Sir, could you just give me about 10 minutes? I'm just finishing up a show, okay?
Okay.
All right, and we are at church, so there are people knocking and trying to get guidance or find me for whatever reason, all right? But if we go to 1 Timothy 3, all right, this word bishop, as seen in the Strong's Concordance, episkopa. But this is a feminine word. This is not a male, this is a feminine verb. Why is the word bishop a feminine noun? It has everything to do with the fact that when Paul was creating this office, the reality of what he was doing was taking the offices that had already existed in the matriarchal societies, where those such as Hat Sheba Sut or Hat Sep Shut. Let's look at it from the parchment we looked at yesterday, the original 12 tribes. Hat Sheba Sut, all right? This word bishopi was actually the female leadership, because the females were the ones that were seen in divinity even before the men. And they were the ones who led within the Kanisa. Now, let's be clear. Matriarchal doesn't mean women over men. That's not what we're teaching. We're saying there was a divine balance. There was a ma'at, whereby the scales are balanced. And knowing this, we as the Holy Qubtic Church of the Black Messiah, Journey Home Group International, recognize the importance of the women in leadership and otherwise, because we as a men, though we have the ability to lead, we can't lead like a woman. And though the women, though they have the ability to lead, they cannot lead like a man. We need both the male and female energies to lead us in this day and time. And so for you brothers and sisters out there who are sitting in these churches and allowing women to be disrespected because of what somebody called Paul, and this Paul was an antichrist. Let's be clear about that. All right. And like I said, next week we'll do a show on Paul, and we'll show you how he actually taught literally against what Yahshua Karas taught. And being an antichrist, he was teaching the doctrines of Rome. He was teaching the doctrines of Greece and what they deemed as Christianity. And so the disrespect that women get today is from the perspective of a society that did not hold their women up, that did not teach their women. Even this whole idea of being an independent woman today, that's from a patriarchal reality. Because the woman who was taking care of the home, who was taking care of the garden, because remember, these were agriculturalists. I don't mean little garden. I mean, these were botanists, such as the guardian angelic host, Renenutet. Renenutet was an actual biologist. I have a friend of mine that I went to high school with at Kingsway, and she did her PhD in and around agriculture. I can't remember the exact thing that her PhD is in, but today she and her husband run a farm. But I say that to say that every time that I look upon our cultures, I think about her, because the reality of the situation is she's a doctor right here in this country today, all right, who is helping to grow food for our people. And that's the manifestation of the divine feminine right now in this day and time. And so the reality of the situation is that we now have an opportunity whereby we can go back into the true scriptures, the original books of the Bible, so that we can see how women were actually upheld, so that we can see that, yes, the woman should be allowed not to only teach, she can also help to lead the church, because she gave birth to all of these people who are arrogant enough to tell her to be quiet, following one called Paul, following the Greeks and the Romans. This has nothing to do with you as an African. I end as I started by saying that our Baba, the great Sheikh Anta Diop, gave us a reality whereby we, as the children of the Most High Heavenly One, and Nere, we must now go back to our teachers. We must go back to our scholars to understand how we lived, how we respected women, how we respected men, understanding what is called this two-cradle origin of culture. Because if we are not taking our cues from our scholars, from our teachers, then we're going to continuously go into this cycle of what ultimately is slavery. You understand? This slavery did not end. It just grew up. You understand? So Sheikh Anta Diop blessed us by making sure that we had the understanding of what, and I'm reading it here just so we're all clear, the two cradle system of cultural origin. I'm going to post it in the comments section, right? The two cradle system of cultural origins, one being patriarchal, which is from the Greeks and the Romans, and the Indo-Aryans and the Pale Arab Emirates. Yes, because we're not only talking about Christianity. I mean, we could go into the Arab world and you could see it's way worse. And that's why Christians today believe they have it so good, because they're looking at their counterparts in the Pale Arab world and seeing how they're being treated, not being able to drive and not being able to do a lot of things that women in the so-called West can do. But the reality of the situation is you're still in a predicament whereby your spirituality has been capped. Your true religious identity has been capped by men who do not have the interests of the community at hand, because no community can rise any higher than the women in that community. The women are the backbone of the community. I'm not pandering to women, so let's get that straight. And I'm not saying all women are wise, and I'm not saying all women represent the law. Stupid is everywhere. Okay? You got some plenty stupid women out there. You understand? But you got a lot of smart ones too. So I'm not just saying, oh, blanket women across the breadth and width of the Bahamas or America or wherever you are watching, all women should be able to lead. That's not what we're teaching you. We're saying that those who are qualified, we're saying that women today run the institutions of the Bahamas, and dare I say the world. You could go into any establishment and find a woman multitasking. You rarely see male cashiers. You rarely see even male teachers. Now, some would argue that, the salary may have something to do with that, but the point of the matter is the women, many of us grew up having female teachers. So how then do we as men have the audacity, after being taught all of our lives by women, to tell a woman that she cannot speak in the church, that she cannot lead in the church? It was the woman who went looking for Jesus after the crucifixion, the so-called resurrection. Not the men. The men ran scared. It was the woman. You understand? But they don't talk about this because the goal of the Greco-Roman society is to downplay the woman. When they talk about Joshua, and you go to the book of Numbers, and they talk about how these Israelites were conquering lands, this was actually the reality behind those stories was the actual Greco-Roman Canaanites, who called themselves Jews, by the way. They were conquering the matriarchal societies. You understand? That's why when they talk about women like Rahab, they would call her a prostitute. That's why when they talk about Eve, they'll say, well, Eve, she was the one who was duped by the serpent. That's why when they go and talk about, if we go to the book of Revelation chapter 12, we'll see where this attack came from, even in the heavens. If you go to Revelation chapter 12, you see something that I'm going to leave you with here today on Q Radio, right? Revelation chapter 12, and let's see where I want to start reading from. All right. Let's go to, I'll start reading from verse 11. So the devil is kicked out of heaven. All right, let's go to verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child. Verse 13, Revelation 12 and 13. And verse 14, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, unto her place where she is nourished for a time and times and a half from the face of the serpent. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman. Who was this earth? This was the African man. And the earth opened, but now they made the man the woman and the woman the man. Another show. It says the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth, angry with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of the Most High and gave the testimony of Yahshua Christ. This is why in Genesis chapter 3 and 15, it says, I will put enmity between thy seed and the woman's seed, talking about the serpent Zerah, or sperma, or sperm, and the woman's seed. Now the woman, through parthenogenesis, can have sperm, but the seed that's being talked about is the mitochondrial DNA, the part that all men who are marrying within the African theology understand. We cleave unto our wives, because all of the children that we have only have the mitochondrial DNA of their mother. So all of my children only have the mitochondrial DNA of my wife. So I have cleaved unto my wife. You understand? And we have to appreciate and understand the reality behind why these things are being done. And it has everything to do with a society that is pretending to be a righteous society, a society that is pretending to give us what is called Christianity today, when really, if we go again to Revelation chapter 12, we'll see who's really running the church. This dragon has been attacking the woman from before the woman even came to this planet, from the heavens. And so to answer the question, my brothers and sisters, yes, the woman should more than just be able to speak in the churches. The woman should be able to lead in the churches. And the women are allowed to lead in the Holy Qubtic Church of the Black Messiah. So I'm not knocking the churches anymore. I have to knock the women who sit in those churches and continue to allow themselves to be disrespected. Why would you stay in those churches? Why would you do it? Well, that's a question you have to answer. Again, this has been another edition of Q Radio, on a quest to bring you the Atonist Karastian narrative under the auspices of the Holy Qubtic Church of the Black Messiah. We're sponsored today by Qubtic Village, Florida. We're also being sponsored today by Qubtic Kitchen Bahamas. You can call Qubtic Kitchen Bahamas at 810-3457. And for all of your chlorine needs, please contact 424-6658 Chlorine Depot, and they'll hook you up with what you need. And we want you to become a sponsor, so inbox me or call, or you can use the details at the top of this show to pay by PayPal, or give us a call to see if we can best interact with you. Again, my name is Ka-Hun, Anku Sa Ra, and I thank each and every one of you for being here. Let me just give a couple of shout outs, man. I see so many of y'all watching, and I appreciate you watching. Brother Juan Bethel, I think this may be the first time I've seen you, Juan. Thank you. My brother Lamont Ellis, yes. Paul Maynard, Sabrina Johnson, Bishop Kellum Kenga Namastu, Winadimi Berlin, Moon, yes, Namastu, brother. Sister Sharon, always watching, yes. Sister Sharon Russell, thank you very much for watching. DJ Counselor, appreciate you watching, my brother. Yes, Latoya Carly, we're gonna have a show on menstruation and all these different things to help you out. Brother Merlin, shouts out, man. Don't let him wake you too hard. You know what I mean? Lisa Miller, Keisha X. I need my book, please, on the Constitution. I need to hook up with you this week to buy that book. All right. But anyway, I gotta run. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow. Now, tomorrow's show, we're gonna be talking about who Moses was in the African theology. Who was Moses? I think you'd want to tune in for that, so make sure you don't miss that. Again, we say Namastu, which means about the divinity in each and every one of you. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow.